The second approach we're going to look at today is membership categorization analysis. Let's look at the key concepts within the term membership categorization analysis. First we have the idea of membership categorization. Categorization itself refers to the natural human tendency to categorize people, things, events, and anything really in order to make sense of them. And this has been discussed in various other fields such as psychology and cognitive science. You can watch some of the YouTube videos linked below. But specifically looking at membership categorization, now this refers to the categorization of people as members of a specific identity or group category. Secondly, analysis. What is involved in analysis in MCA? So, like CA, analysts are concerned with analyzing interactional practices as well as discursive practices related to membership and categorization work. So the CA aligned researchers who use MCA would look at categorizational practices within interactional turns and sequential patterns, and other analysts also use MCA to analyze categorizational practices in various kinds of discourse, including written discourse. The key influence of the field of MCA is Sachs' work related to membership categories. So Sachs brought up the idea of membership categorization and how in talk interactions will project, create, or allude to certain membership categories, for example, mummy, baby, policeman, and so on. So, in this sense, MCA is highly influenced by the field of conversation analysis and sociology, and there are also influences from ethnomethodology and ethnography, as it's linked to naturally occurring talk, it's linked to collecting authentic data and going into the context. We also have influences from linguistics, specifically in the field of discourse analysis. So certain linguistic and discursive concepts are also brought into the discussions and analysis in MCA research. MCA focuses on members' practices in describing the world and how they use discourse and interaction to display their understanding of the world and of the workings of society. So the focus is on the type of categorical work, how we project categories for ourselves, self-categorization, and also we project categories onto the other. And these categories are inference rich because when you're mobilizing a category such as parent or child or doctor, teacher and student, you're drawing on inferences about what these types of memberships mean and the broader categories which these memberships belong to. And these kinds of understandings are shared in order for them to work. The person and the people we're talking to have to be able to recognize and also work from the same type of understandings. And so this is a way of looking at social structures specifically related to how we categorize people in terms of their membership in a particular type of identity category. So let's look at some of the units of analysis in MCA. The first one is the top level kind of unit of analysis, which is the membership categorization device. So when we're using identity categories such as mommy or baby, these are heard as belonging to the MCD or the broader collective category of family. Now, the categories might belong to more than one type of MCD depending on how it's used in context. For example, if talking about baby, young person, middle-aged, and older adult, we might be deploying the MCD of stage of life rather than family. And this would, of course, depend on the use in context and various rules of application. MCA doesn't just look at the nouns or the categories that are used in talk, but also the analysis includes category-bound activities. For example, certain activities that are linked to categories. So teaching or going to the doctor We might link the category men to a particular type of activity, as in this example, in the reluctance of going to the doctor. We also have category-tied predicates. So these are more the verb phrases, and these kind of allude to a particular category's characteristics. So like this mother cares, care is a predicate for her baby, and we see how these two categories of mother and baby are connected within this by this predicate of caring. There's also the concept of standardized relational pairs, pairs of categories that fit together and carry certain duties and moral obligations. For example, parent and child, teacher and pupil, and neighbor and neighbor. Let's look at the steps of doing an MCA research project as listed by Stoko in this week's readings. So the first step is to collect data, and as Stoko elaborates, we can collect various types of interactional data, whether it's from domestic or everyday settings or institutional settings such as police interviews. And the data can also include textual data. The next step is to build collections. So in this stage, we will collect explicit mentions of categories. So look through the data, either listen to it or read it, and find categories such as mother, person, student that are explicitly mentioned in the text. The next stage is to identify the sequential position of each of these instances of these explicit category mentions. So where do they occur in the talk, in which sequence? Following that, we want to analyze the design and action orientation of the turn or piece of text. So once we have located the sequential position of this category work, whether it's at the beginning, the ending, where does it occur in that particular type of interaction, we want to look at the turn. What is the action that is being performed in that turn? For example, is it an accusation? Is it resisting an accusation? Is it asking a question? And so on. Finally, we want to look for evidence of the patterns that we have identified in our analysis. So we want to look at how the recipient of that particular categorical turn orients to the category, whether it's an explicit category, it's the deploying of a particular device, it's a predicate that implies a particular category. We want to see the response of the next person to that category to help support our analysis. And we want to look at some of the features of interaction or discourse that occur regularly when this particular type of category is used. Another element that we can look on in our analysis is how speakers build and resist categorizations. Let's look at some examples of studies that have used MCA. This first one is by William Housley and colleagues. With Richard Fitzgerald, Housley has done extensive work using MCA, and he's one of the key scholars using this approach. You can look up his other publications if you're interested to learn more, and these include full-length books about how to use MCA. In this paper, the researchers examined Twitter data, so this is a little bit different to the types of data you saw in Stoko's paper, which largely discussed categorical work and practices in spoken discourse. In this paper, the researchers focused on tweets of a particular Twitter user, a celebrity Twitter user. She has many followers, and she is quite known for posting controversial and potentially antagonistic tweets on current issues. The tweets are analyzed as category formulations, which deploy specific and recurring membership categories and features that can be understood as being particularly antagonistic. For example, in this tweet here that we see on the screen about the teachers' strike, we can see explicit categories such as educators, babysitters, child, and working moms. And these categories are used to perform certain types of moral work. Here, the category educator or teacher is placed as being morally responsible for penalizing working moms who might be affected by the teachers' strike. So although she does not explicitly say that educators or teachers are troubling or causing trouble to working moms, this is the implied understanding or how this tweet can be read. This next study uses spoken data, looking at how categories are used by speakers within interactional turns. This is a book chapter that I wrote with Dr. David Young in a book on the discourse of police interviews. In this study, we used MCA to analyze a police interview in a very famous case when a right-wing senator was arrested on suspicion of soliciting sexual services in a public bathroom. O1 is Officer 1 and D is the detainee. In this excerpt, we can see how the detainee claims a certain category for himself, specifically that of a commuter, and through the use of certain predicates such as going to the bathroom and sitting down, he aligns himself to the category of being a regular commuter visiting the bathroom rather than someone who is there for other reasons. In this paper, we look at how morally linked categories are used by the policeman and the detainee, either to claim innocence or to ascribe culpability and blame in the interview. This paper uses MCA to look at discourse in an online forum on the topic of school exclusion. The researchers analyzed the comments from the public that appeared under an article in the Guardian online newspaper, and this article was an op-ed that discussed the exclusion of underperforming children in British secondary schools. The researchers focused on how categories are used in constructions of blame for the issue of school exclusion. As you can see on the table, in the table on the left, they tracked the frequency with which certain categories were blamed in the comments. For example, blaming children, blaming teachers, blaming politicians, and they also noted the types of certain types of discursive or interactional features like what WH questions, but formulations, extreme case formulations, and metaphors. The comments were also analyzed closely to look at the discursive practices used by the commenters to create the moral categories of victims and blameworthy. Now that we've talked a bit about MCA, here's a self-learning activity for you. Looking back at the reading for the week by Stoko on MCA, focus on how she describes the analysis in relation to the different extracts. And for this activity, look at extract 1 on page 284. Examine the extracts as well as the analysis that is written alongside the extract and answer these questions. Which membership categorical device do the participants orient to in the interaction? What interactional practice is this categorization work situated in? What are they actually doing? And then finally, do you note any other category implicative talk? Here's the extract for the self-learning activity. You can find it in the readings as well. I look forward to seeing your answers to the questions. So we've come to the end of our video on membership categorization analysis. I hope you found it interesting and have some ideas about various types of analysis you might want to do. If you have any questions, comments, or observations, feel free to add them in the comment box below this video.